As someone who's interested in and enjoys my fair share of politics and news and history and the like, it's kind of interesting to me to look at how major geopolitical events, major historical events, work to shape the frame in which nearly every other thing works. As we look at, for example, World War II, and it seems like nearly everything since World War II is framed as some group is the Nazis, some group is the fascists, or are the fascists, and this group are the Nazis, this person is literally Hitler reincarnated, and nearly everything is squeezed into that frame. Or maybe if it's not squeezed into that frame, it's squeezed into the Russia and the communist versus capitalist frame, and nearly everything is along those lines. And in modern times, we see that also with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and now in the Caribbean, we're seeing someone attempting to frame here in this area a bit of conflict as that similar Ukraine-Russian conflict. One party involved calling the other the Caribbean's Zelenskyy. And we're going to dive into that and see exactly the details of that and how is it working. And is anybody really and truly a parallel of Zelenskyy or a parallel of Russia, a parallel of Ukraine in this conflict here? And is there a resolution to the conflict? Does it seem like there's going to be a peaceful solution out of this? Or is it going to create a similar result as is happening in the real Russia-Ukraine conflict? As distant as it might seem to some of us who just look at it on the news with the big, beautiful ocean in between us, as one politician is given to say, it could seem like it's just a story, but to people living it, that's thousands of people dying per week. That's a lot of people dying, and that's not something that I believe Guyana or Venezuela or South America or the Caribbean or Latin America, any of the areas, the geographical profiles involved, I don't think any of us really want that. So we're going to look at these stories and see exactly how it's turning out, what are some of the details of it, and who is involved. Make sure you hit that like button if you have not hit that like button. Yeah, drop a comment if you have something to say. If you are not yet subscribed, please do subscribe. Hit the notification bell also, so you know exactly when these videos drop. And the best way to really share the podcast is to share the podcast. Tell people, hey, listen to this. This is some good stuff. Take it in. So let's jump right into this.
On Friday, the Caribbean community Caricom routinely issued a statement after its 48th regular meeting of its heads of government. The communique made it clear Venezuela must not infringe on Guyana's sovereign territory, including the Essequibo region and its surrounding maritime space. Just hours later, early on Saturday morning, the situation became alarming. Reports emerged of a Venezuelan Coast Guard vessel in Guyana's exclusive economic zone, specifically.
It's interesting too that Venezuela did this kinda right after Caricom gave a warning that please don't infringe on Guyanese waters, and literally the day after they do this, you could kind of wonder if this was a kind of or else what from Venezuela. Like, okay, you say that we shouldn't do this, but what are you going to do about it? And to some extent, people don't like the idea that might makes right. That's not fair. That's not a good thing. But the reality of the world and geopolitics is that is kind of the case. Might does make right to some extent. And if you don't have the might on your side, then who is to enforce what is right? We are supposed to be living in the rules-based order, but if someone doesn't want to follow the rules, who is going to make them follow it? Wouldn't it be the mighty? And in this case, is Caricom mighty enough to make Venezuela do anything that we ask them?
A site crucial for offshore oil operations. Social media quickly spread images and videos of the vessel and Venezuelan soldiers communicating with the Prosperity floating production, storage and offloading vessel before moving on to other units in the area.
According to your present geographical position, you are operating in the exclusive economic zone of Venezuela, Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
The patrol vessel transmitted a radio message declaring that the FPSO was operating in what it termed disputed international waters.
Soon after, the Guyanese government confirmed the incursion, and President Dr. Irfaan Ali swiftly activated diplomatic channels and condemned the actions as a violation of both international law and agreements made between the two nations.
Again, if it's a violation of international law, that's the thing with international law. International law only really works with international police. And who are the international police? I mean, for a while it was the United States, but if you don't want the United States to act as the international police, who is going to enforce international law? Who is going to stop them, really and truly? What are you going to do about it if they say, we really don't care? We don't give a hoot, we don't care what you say, we are not going to listen to what you're saying. What are you going to do about it then? Now, the benefit that Guyana has, being on this side of the world, is that for the most part, they're surrounded by many mighty groups that are very interested in Venezuela staying in their place, because Venezuela is sitting on a lot of oil, and if they are able to really manipulate that to their benefit, then people who aren't exactly their friends could be in a bit of a ticklish position. Let's look at probably the best counter that Guyana has for this right now. U.S. warns Venezuela after its vessels threaten ExxonMobil's Starbucks FPSOs offshore Guyana. South American neighbors' territorial dispute escalating at the weekend, and they go back through some of what we already know. The General Secretariat of the Organization of American States, in a statement, said it unequivocally condemns the recent actions of the Venezuelan naval vessels threatening ExxonMobil's FPSO units operating within Guyana's internationally recognized maritime territory. The General Secretariat urged Venezuela to adhere to respect ongoing international legal processes, including the adjudication of the territorial dispute before the International Court of Justice. Guyana has already engaged the UK, France, US, Brazil, and the Caricom community on Venezuela's move, and Ali added his government would also formally inform the ICJ of its neighbor's breach. The US issued a stern warning to Nicolas Maduro's regime following reports that a Venezuelan patrol boat entered into Guyanese waters, threatening ExxonMobil's offshore operations. Venezuelan naval vessels threatening ExxonMobil's floating production, storage, and offloading unit is unacceptable and a clear violation of Guyana's internationally recognized maritime territory, the State Department's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs said on its X, formerly Twitter, account. Further provocation will result in consequences for the Maduro regime. The United States reaffirms its support for Guyana's territorial integrity. And to me, that might be some of the most important support for Guyana right now, because that support with some teeth. I believe sometime last year, the Maduro regime out of Venezuela was accusing the United States of having secret bases inside of that entire Essequibo region. So if that is true, that is kind of a serious deterrent for Venezuela. It is a security guarantee for Guyana, as we see they're asking about in the European Council, where Ukraine wants that same kind of security guarantee. It seems like there is some of that for Guyana, with the United States ensuring that there would be serious consequences for such a move. And it's not just the United States. Brazil, which is also Venezuela's neighbor, Brazil's military reinforces border with Venezuela and Guyana due to Essequibo. A convoy of military trucks and armored vehicles set off for Brazil's northern border on Friday to reinforce the presence of the Brazilian army in response to tensions over Venezuela's claim to Guyana's Essequibo region. More than 2 dozen armored cars arrived in Manaus by river transport, and some left by road for Boa Vista, capital of Roraima State, where the local garrison will be increased to 600 soldiers, the army said in a statement. And this is out of February. This is since the start of February. Brazil already begun reinforcing their forces along that border region in anticipation of, whatever action might be occurring out there. So Guyana has in its camp Brazil and the United States. And I think for the large part, that is a significant deterrent. That, to me, changes the scope of this from Russia versus Ukraine. Because, okay, yes, Ukraine had some allies on their side, but the deterrence before Russia invaded wasn't necessarily as strong right at that area. I believe this may be a bit stronger, and Venezuela may be quite a bit weaker than Russia. So hopefully the amount of deterrence from one Brazil on the border there and the United States being right around the corner. I mean, in this case, it's not the big, beautiful ocean separating the United States and Venezuela. That is basically within the U.S. wheelhouse. And it seems like this new administration out of the United States seems more focused on things around the more immediate Western Hemisphere. So I don't believe they would be very okay with Venezuela making a land grab out there in South America. Venezuela isn't happy about the whole series of affairs, though, and their general is basically condemning many of those involved, saying that those involved are stirring up conflict and setting things up for violence, which is a scary thing to hear coming out from the people that may be interested in actually launching the violence. Venezuela slams Guyana regional groups for promoting hostility over border. Despite sharp condemnation from Guyana and the international community, including the United States, Venezuela continues to defend its actions regarding the latest maritime incident in the disputed Essequibo region. On March 2nd, Venezuela Defense Minister General Vladimir Padrino Lopez issued a statement saying that the National Armed Force categorically rejects the statements made by Guyana President Dr. Irfan Ali on the incident that occurred in waters pending delimitation, according to Venezuela. It is imperative to remember that the aforementioned dispute has a valid legal instrument in force, deposited in the General Assembly of the UN, which governs its practical, political, and satisfactory solution, the Geneva Agreement, Lopez said. Therefore, Guyana has no legal basis or legitimacy to unilaterally dispose of a space where it cannot exercise sovereignty or jurisdiction. Ali had denounced what he called an incursion, alleging we know what they are alleging. Lopez also accused the Guyanese government of allowing the exploitation of hydrocarbons in violation of international law, condemning what he referred to as the imperialistic actions of companies like ExxonMobil, which he claims are backed by North American interests. And you're seeing a framing coming up here that seeks to really tie in why, as we see further on the accusations of the Caribbean Zelenskyy there, because the accusation that they're trying to levy here is that what is going on in Guyana is basically part of the United States imperial project. This is U.S. empire spreading into South America, and they, as bastions for freedom and independence and indigenous rule, are there to fight against it and stand up against it. And truth be told, that is a very alluring narrative for a lot of South America, a lot of the Caribbean, a lot of the former colonized world. It is a very alluring narrative, so I could understand why they would use it. Now, on the other hand, money is a more alluring narrative. So in Guyana's case, if Guyana is getting wealth out of this, the accusation that they're selling out to the empire, if the empire is paying top dollar, some people, maybe even the majority, may not really care. FANB rejects the biased and partial positions assumed by some regional organizations, which, far from contributing to the solution of the dispute between Venezuela and Guyana, constitute themselves prophets of disaster by promoting hostility and warlike policies, Lopez said. Faced with these incessant attacks, the armed institution, faithful to its anti-imperialist nature, prepares itself in perfect popular military police fusion to respond to any threat and preserve the territorial integrity and peace of the republic. So they're framing it as these are attacks on them, and they're looking to defend themselves. And it's interesting, as I saw noted a while back, how basically every ministry of war, every war secretary over the 20th century changed from the ministry of war, war administrative group inside of governance, all changed to defense ministries all of a sudden. In the 20th century, it's all just defense ministries, because the story that is almost always told on pretty much every military incursion is that they were defending their people. You ask Mr. Vladimir Putin, President Putin out of Russia, what's going on right now in Ukraine is a defense of the Russian ethnic people, the Russian ethnic minorities out there in eastern Ukraine, and that's what they are doing there. It's all in defense. No attacking is going on here, and that's pretty much the same thing that the Venezuelans are accusing here. However, on January 10th, a statement from the U.S. State Department listed Lopez as a wanted man and offered a U.S. $15 million reward for information leading to his arrest. The department cited his alleged involvement in drug trafficking operations. The statement added that Lopez was indicted by a U.S. District of Columbia federal grand jury in May 2019 on charges related to the distribution of cocaine. The statement added, after Maduro declared victory in the July 2024 presidential election, despite evidence to the contrary, Maduro purported to reaffirm Padrino Lopez as his Minister of Defense. So the allegations out of the United States is that the Minister of Defense is a drug trafficker. That's scary stuff if you're looking at this as Trinidad and Tobago, where we struggle with being a drug transshipment location. If we have a narco state, and the thing is, we have a local opposition leader here in Trinidad and Tobago who has been accusing Venezuela of being a narco state. So there's that. And if we do in fact have a narco state to our south, how are we defending against that? What policies are in place to stop state-sponsored drugs, as alleged by the United States, from coming into our country? That's a bit of a scary position to be in. And if that accusation is in fact true, you could understand how loyal a defense minister would be. What steps would he not take if he's a wanted man outside of his position of having basically a country's army at his beck and call? He is extremely loyal to the people that keep him in that position, because he is wanted by pretty much the world's most powerful law enforcement agencies. So staying in that defense minister position might literally be a case of freedom and captivity for him. So what would he not do? What order would he not follow through on? Newsday contacted Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Amy Brown for comments and referred all questions to the Office of the Prime Minister. Acting Prime Minister Stuart Young said Trinidad and Tobago's position is that we fully support Guyana's sovereignty and we advocate for and encourage the application of and abide by the Argyle Accord. No further information was given. Very interesting in that there was no condemnation of Venezuela's action coming from Trinidad and Tobago, because we do in fact have some of our hands, or at least our hand, inside of the Venezuelan cookie jar. Possibly. Hopefully for us, there are some cookies inside that cookie jar. So it's not in our best interest to really upset Venezuela to a significant amount. But what kind of position does that really put us in? Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland King's Council also reinforced Guyana's position and condemned Venezuela. The Commonwealth Secretary General has condemned this action in the strongest possible terms and urged the international community and the Commonwealth family to continue to support Guyana. Again, look at the direction of that. Most of the foreign leaders and foreign organizations have condemned Venezuela's actions, while what we did is we support Guyana's sovereignty. Not exactly the same thing. The statement also praised Guyana's response, saying it exhibited restraint and responsibility by engaging in diplomatic actions to address the crisis. And the diplomatic actions it engaged in is invoking the Argyle Accord, meeting planned to discuss Venezuela-Guyana dispute. The Prime Minister of Dominica has announced that Caricom countries under the auspices of the Argyle Agreement are planning to meet this week with representatives from Guyana and Venezuela on the latest border dispute incident. On March 3rd, several Caribbean media outlets, including Grenada-based WPG-10, reported Roosevelt Skerritt saying, "We are in discussions with both sides and we are seeking to have a meeting sometime this week with both sides to continue ensuring that the articles within the Argyle Declaration continue to be observed and so we can continue to have the region as a zone of peace." In December 2023, in Argyle, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ali and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held discussions on matters related to the territorial dispute. All parties reiterated their commitment to remaining a zone of peace in Latin America, and the Caribbean, Guyana, and Venezuela made several declarations, including agreeing not to threaten or use force against one another under any circumstances, including those arising from any existing controversies between the two countries. On March 1st, Guyana's President Dr. Irfan Ali denounced what he called an incursion, alleging a Venezuelan Coast Guard vessel. We know what the allegations are. So, in its defense, Venezuela charged that the FPSO was operating in Venezuela's exclusive economic zone and labeled Ali the Caribbean Zelenskyy, referring to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The same day, March 1st, Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez urged Caricom to play a constructive role and avoid a conflict in the region. On the proposed meeting, Dominica's Prime Minister was quoted as saying, "It is discussions we have to have. We always believe that we can only resolve matters in the world through diplomacy." Same thing happening with Russia and Ukraine. War, engaging diplomacy, and we must not give up on the good old dialogue and discussions and using our good offices in CARICOM to ensure that the Caribbean remains a zone of peace. Grenada's Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell told reporters that a protocol for ongoing dialogue is already in place. "We have a permanent Argyle Accord in place that allows Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, St. Vincent and the Grenadines to act as interlocutor between Georgetown and Caracas. This obviously is an ongoing issue. We expect from time to time there might be disagreements or different perspectives, and we expect that CARICOM and particularly the mechanisms set up by the Argyle Convention to be triggered by either or both sides. Support for Guyana continues to pour in." It's going to be interesting to see how this all turns out, because I am not sure, even with the Argyle Agreement, that Argyle Accord, what can be done about this. Because Venezuela's solution seems to be running parallel to Guyana's solution, and Guyana's solution seems to be running in tandem or along with generally the wider world. So if Venezuela's solution is in their own world by themselves and Guyana's solution is in a different world not by themselves with company, what's going to happen when those two solutions meet at loggerheads? And I'm pretty sure Guyana's perspective is that they aren't going to give up any of their territory. So how is the Argyle Accord going to work? What is the give and take that can be given and taken in this situation? I mean, if you're looking at Ukraine and Russia, the position that they're in presently, that discussions are being had, it seems like, okay, Russia has already taken some of the territory from Ukraine, and very likely in whatever form of discussion and agreement being made that they have, Russia may keep some of that territory while making an agreement not to encroach further or something of the like. But what is the give and take in this agreement? Is there any give and take, or is it that Venezuela is going to have to back down totally? And would it be in Maduro's interest for him to be seen as just backing down from something like this? How is that going to work? If they are holding elections separately inside of that region that Guyana claims, and Venezuela then claims that the election is won by the people who want to go onto Venezuela's side, what next? And would it be the case that the deterrence on this side of the world is stronger than the deterrence that Russia had, and the power of the Russian military was much stronger than the power of the Venezuelan military, and such we wouldn't actually see any real military action? Now, the thing is, if they're accusing Venezuela of being a narco state, and their defense minister is allegedly a trafficker of drugs, then all actions don't necessarily have to be above board. There was a story coming out of Guyana that several of their defense force soldiers were assaulted out in that region by alleged Venezuelan gang members. And if that's the case, if the Venezuelan gangs and the Venezuelan cartels and the Venezuelan drug runners are proxies of the Venezuelan government, and they use them as more that kind of insurgency style, where Venezuela could say, it's not us, it's just these bandits and cartel members out there in that region. Would that be the technique? Would that be the strategy? And how would that be negated? Would Guyana be willing to call up the US for defense? Or would the Guyanese defense be capable of undoing all of that all on their own? Tell me what you think in the comments. That's all I have for now. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, do share the content. Tell people about it. Later.